illustrious speaker for the day, Dr. Ennapadam S. Krishnamurthy, USK, Mr. Vijay Kumar, the team MMA, senior corporate leaders, students, and all the attendees today, both the physical as well as those who are connected online. Very good evening. It's quite a pleasure and happy moment for me to be here. While getting associated itself with MMA is a privilege. Why I'm saying this, as a very many early years of my career, at the same place before we being a pan-India company, we keep moving around Gujarat, Mumbai, such venues. I had privilege of attending some of the real great speakers like Mr. Kamath, Chris Gopalakrishnan. I mean, these are the early the forums which I had attended, and recently after I came back, I mean, great opportunity. Let me tell you, to listen to Tata Sons Chandrasekhar, man from Tamil Nadu, then subsequently Mr. T.V. Narendran, Tata Steel MD, and very recently Mr. Krishnamurthy Subramanian, our former CA to Honorable PM, as well as the present Executive Director, World Bank. I mean, these are, I think, unimaginable level of people who come here and share their thoughts. So, I'm very happy he made me part of this, the great, very reputed organization, and the kind of service they do, human service to organization development, leadership development, as well as the concern they have on the community is very inspiring. Of course, I am associated with many CSRs where I could play a role in tweaking those programs so that it reaches really the privileged, both in my earlier tenure as a head of the Gujarat in NOIL, but yet for an organization of this kind of body for which the purpose was different, now reaching out to communities really one step forward, the thought process which is otherwise not straitjacketed. Really appreciate them. You live as a model for any such organizations. Thank you, and especially thank Mr. Vijay Kumar for one thing. Always I requested, stepped beyond what was told to me. All these programs, he invites all of us, of course, me, but I request him, my colleagues, I would like to put before these great sessions, these speakers, so that they also grow. Okay, the very purpose for which this organization has been formed. So it has been very nice. My leaders, those HODs who are at the level of chief general managers, were also been allowed to attend those sessions. Thank MMA for the special gesture. I will continue to ask you that privilege. So if I miss being physically not able to be present, I try to be in the connect with the video or that. Thanks. So that acknowledgement is first due. Coming to the present speaker, just I was looking at some of the reviews of Practo. Let me read that. One is very interesting about the today's speaker. Very impressive. Let me tell you about the doctor. What has been written by one Shobha. He may not be seeing all that, but I thought I would share with you. One doctor who gives patient time, listen to all our complaints related. He treats people holistically. Have given rebirth to me, is the words mentioned. This was one which impressed me. Rebirth to me. I don't know how many more countless patients he has done this. Thank you, doctor. This is what one Shobha has written in the Practo review. And if you look at it, there are 84% of the people who have, very positively rated him. Dr. Ennapadam Krishnamurthy, founder Buddhi Clinic. I think somewhere we get connected. In fact, let me share with you that for civil services, I had an aspiration to join civil services. At that time, I chose psychology as my subject, one of the subjects, apart from management. I had chosen that, and that was, of course, it's not psychiatry, it is psychology. Okay, but doctor is a specialist. After medicine, he went on to specialize himself in psychiatry and therapies. So that's where he comes. And today's topic, let me slightly dwell on that brain and mind. We all made mistake of using the words brain and mind interchangeably. It is an easy slip, as the two may seem synonymous, but they fundamentally are different. The brain is the physical organ housed within our skull, responsible for regulating all bodily functions and serving as the command center of central nervous system. It gathers, organizes, and disseminates information to maintain our body's harmony. In contrast, the mind is an abstract concept that has been the subject of debate and exploration by spiritual gurus, philosophers, scholars, scientists, and theologians for centuries. While definitions vary, the mind is generally understood as a complex network of thought processes and consciousness arising from the brain's neurological activity. It operates across different states: conscious, unconscious, and subconscious. Brain is tangible, the mind is not. Both are integral to our identity and actions. Leadership at its core is about influencing others based on who we are and what we do. Therefore, understanding how the brain and mind influence human behavior is crucial for today's leaders as they develop and demonstrate the traits needed to lead effectively. Few examples are how do we react. Of course, doctor can evaluate my opinions, but let me trying to understand the brain and mind. A simple thing that we come across as we drive, we will find, especially on highways, one of the vehicles will be coming just in the same lane as we are driving. And how do we react to that? We take all these inputs, our mind processes, and we react in different ways. All of us different. One, I will tell you, we would also go in the same lane with the same aggression, same speed. That is one way of responding to the brain, whatever the neuro inputs that have come. The other would be the just going away, allowing and convincing ourselves that there is no need to collide with him. Let him go, he will learn his own lesson. These two different ways we deal with him. The aggressive opponent. The dealing, that portion is actually the mind portion. And there is another story, it doesn't stop with brain and mind, there is also a heart to it. Especially when we talk about management, leadership, dealing with people, it's so important that heart is also coming into the existence and we deal with things. And for really leadership to sustain and really create leaders, I think these three things we need to understand very clearly and respond, actually. So one is the reflex you have, that's a simple, I think the inputs are taken and we immediately reflect it. But this is another thing, when we come to mind and heart. I can quote one of the examples that I had to see when there was a challenge. Challenging circumstances are the most important occasions where you really, the mind comes into play. Don't go by brain. I think Anand is there from Kriyas. He can understand being a man who is very closely connected to oil industry. I haven't told him, but let me tell today, there was an occasion where I was posted as in charge for that place. We handle oil logistics. I was heading that terminal, the terminal manager in Coimbatore. There was also one oil industry disaster that happened in the year 2009. There was a big disaster in Jaipur where there was a fire. 11 people died, and it was a very a high level of fire accident, which could not be controlled. In fact, the products were allowed to actually completely get exhausted in the fire for 11 days. Nothing could be done. It becomes quite uncontrolled. So after that incident, within a month, I had to face a kind of petrol leak amongst all the petroleum fuels. Petrol is deadly actually. In fact, we call it, you disrespect the petroleum fuels, it gives you back. If you respect, this also takes care of you. I mean, the respect in the sense, the following the processes, safety guidelines. So one such occasion, it was actually 4:30 p.m. Normally we wind up our operations and go home. But at that time, that means we have already supplied to the various petrol pumps, customers, the fuel required, and therefore there would not be additional requirement. At such an occasion, so you can't empty it. So during such occasion, there was a leak, and I just made a round of the terminal. It's about 70-acre complex, Coimbatore. Then I do not know, really, it was a very challenging situation. If leak is allowed, exactly what happened in the Jaipur incident, leak is allowed to, go on. What would happen? No, it would vaporize. It will create vapors adequate enough for creating a phenomenon called fire and vapor clouds. Vapor clouds will burst actually. So one trigger is enough. In fact, Jaipur fire, people established there was nearby one temple where when they were doing Aarti, the vapor clouds have flown in the wind and reached that temple. So one got ignited and it spread to the entire terminal, which could not be controlled, and it was a disaster. So that was running in my mind, little bit scary situation. So the people who were moment had, they were all running. But one thing that struck me, no need to panic, wait. Slowly, even don't run in the terminal. Wait, go slowly. At least go, don't run in the terminal. It creates further panic. So went back to my cabin and called my boss at the time. It was very similar to me. There was an AD, and there was also my immediate boss, the one Deputy General Manager Operations. I just briefed him about the incident and told him, this is the situation. Then I thought typical reaction for these things would be rush whole team there. So they would take the next flight and reach there. Then I requested my ED then, I need one help. Don't send anybody here. This is what I told him. Don't send anybody here. Our team is capable of handling this situation. As you send someone, I need to go to airport and receive them. Let me handle this disaster, whatever about to happen situation. And then we went back. The whole night we walked. In fact, I will tell you the people, how they come together. Two of my women staff and an officer refused to go home at 12:30 in the night. They said they will not go unless completely the situation is normal. So they stayed back. We normally, simple understanding, we pump water inside, take the product to a safer place, another tank. But it is not easy. When the water is, density is more than the product, it would settle down. So the objective was that level where the leak is there, you fill up water, so that water would come out. But attaining that, you need to do some at least 20 times filling, transferring, very challenging situation. Prevent the leak. But we did it exactly at 5:30 a.m. We were through. Then my people were worried. No, I told them, don't bother. My cell phone will be, it was 2009, so cell phone had come. Given to security. Whenever you want to know the situation, give a ring. Because we have a walkie-talkie systems. So everybody is connected all the time. So security are informed. You keep updating. Whenever people are calling, please tell them that this is what is going on. Things are under control. So morning, 5:30 I came back, 5:45 I gave a ring to both my ED and my immediate boss and told them everything is safe now. Okay, everything is safe now. More, see that at that time, it was very fearful situation. But somehow I had confidence on the team. Let me tell you, the highlight of the incident is not this. There was one officer at 6 a.m. I find reporting. He rushed, he was on leave at Chennai. He took a bus and reached our place. The Coimbatore was the entire action was going on. So when I asked him, Who told you? No, I got the information, sir. Nobody need to even advise me. Simply took a bus and reached. I want to be there, handling the disaster that has happened to our place. That's the kind of response people will do if there is a absolute understanding, coordination, and team spirit prevailing. More importantly, I only salute that spirit of that person without being told he came. So these are the situations where you need to don't react to the stimuli. More importantly, we will listen to him, the language of the medical language. So, but these are the really opportunities to demonstrate your leadership, make the team also capable of handling. I mean, that's most important as you build your career, especially students are there. Maybe I'll close the opening remarks with one more example. How do we handle children? I have two sons, very mischievous fellows. Very times feel like the way they would behave, I would feel like remove my belt and beat them. Really, let me tell you the kind of the behaviors. But when they were coming up, one is tried to be like a friend. I think other day also very similar example somebody was quoting. The very hall. The other thing I started telling is, in fact, my wife used to be very upset. I used to tell them, I won't speak to you. I won't speak to you for some time. In fact, they would come and cry in front of me. After some time, I've seen this is how normally people react. They get very upset if a father, he doesn't speak to the kids. Then slowly I found them, they became already been over years, they've become a good citizens, I would say. I'm very happy that they've come up with a good value system. So you can beat them, you can castigate them, but there is a subtle way of dealing with the mind, I would say. This is what how do we, in between, we play a role in which we can really create a good behavior in the people and make a difference to whichever organization, whether you are part of MMA, part of an Indian Oil-like organization, or a role that we have in the community, you can make a difference with this. So with that opening remarks, I would leave to Doctor for taking it forward, and I am also very keen to listen to him more as a student of psychology. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for both inspiring remarks and for setting the context, and Group Captain Vijay Kumar and the team at MMA for inviting us in Buddhi Clinic to do this. So this is the third lecture in the series, and some of you might have come to the first two. And what we are trying to do is to build on what we said about intelligence and how intelligence develops and the mind develops, to talking about how you can prepare it for leadership. And I'm going to be using examples from published literature, books of management, and I hope that you'll all go back, especially the students, will go back and read the books of management, because at the end of the day, I'm only giving you a snippet from a book of management. So the first thing to recognize is that it's not whether you're smart, it is how you're smart. Believe me, everyone in this room is smart in some way or the other. Okay? And Howard Gardner says there are many ways of being smart. A naturalist is smart when it comes to nature, farming, geography. A person with spatial intelligence is good with design, architecture. Person with musical intelligence is good with music. Person with logical reasoning will do well in professions like law and medicine and management. A person with good interpersonal skills will do well in marketing and sales, or customer care, or human resources. Person with bodily kinesthetic intelligence will be a sportsman or a performer, a dancer. A person who is a linguist will do well with anything that requires languages or the ability to learn languages a skill. And a person with good intrapersonal intelligence who understands himself will be a good philosopher, possibly even a good leader. Okay? Now, when you think about it like this, we all have at least 3 of these intelligences. You can ask yourself, which of these do I have? You probably are good at 3 of these things on average, right? This is something to keep in mind. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is how do you develop this? Okay. Now, it's important, therefore, that rather than get boxed into doing something, right now everyone's saying AI. So I go and do AI. You have to ask yourself, is this something that comes naturally to me? It's very, very important to address your aptitude. What comes naturally to you? So people automatically go towards the intelligences which they have, at high order. That's very important. My job, for example, involves talking to a lot of people. Now, if I didn't like talking to people, it's a bad job for me too, right? So if I was an introvert, then it's not a great job for me to do. Similarly, you need to understand what your local culture demands. Okay? Going and doing something which sounds fancy, has some global perspective, but is not applicable where you are locally, is not a great idea. And in the same way, society needs to recognize the contribution of the person. So this requires a bilateral openness. We understand what the community we live in, the society we live in requires. Society understands that we are valuable and we can contribute. So there is a bilaterality to it. I've already said this, that there are multiple intelligences and you're best off if you go towards the intelligence that comes most naturally to you or towards those intelligences that come most naturally to you. Now, the most important thing to take away from this, therefore, is understand your intelligences before you set off on career or leadership or even a career change. Today, the average person has 3 careers, not 1. Okay? So understand even before a career change, please understand what your intelligences are. They are your weapons. Go to war with your intelligences. Don't go to war against your own intelligences. This is extremely important to keep in your mind. Now, this is a wonderful book, 5 Minds for the Future, by the same Harvard psychologist, Howard Gardner. He describes 5 minds that are necessary for leadership. Okay. The first mind is the disciplined mind. This is what you acquire through years you spend in scholarship, a craft, or a profession. It takes you about a decade to master. And if you think about it, most of us, by the time we've done a bachelor's and a master's and some little bit of training, it's a decade, right? It emerges from developing skill sets. It emerges from developing a knowledge base. And that's why we have something called education, and that's why perhaps education is very important. Today it's very fanciful because people tell us, oh, Bill Gates dropped out of college. Steve Jobs dropped out of college. Elon Musk dropped out of college. So if you drop out of college, you'll be successful. Not necessarily. If you understand these personalities, you'll understand why they dropped out of college, right? For most of us, those years in education are extremely valuable because they teach us a knowledge base and they teach us a skill set. And that's the disciplined mind. Okay? Then, of course, you have something called the synthesizing mind, which comes usually when you start working. This is learning to integrate different pieces of information. And you start putting that information to work. Remember, when you're studying, it's all theoretical. When you start working, you're starting to apply your intelligence, right? So synthesizing information becomes important. Identifying what jobs there are to be done, identifying how to do those jobs, that becomes important as part of synthesis. Identifying priorities. Please remember, you go to a workplace, you'll get a zillion things to do on a given day. What are you going to do first? What are you going to keep to for later? Prioritizing becomes extremely important. And then applying your knowledge base to understand your ideas. This becomes extremely important, and all this you do through the power of synthesis. Then comes the creating mind. So without discipline, without synthesis, it is difficult to create meaningfully. Okay, you may create, but you may not create meaningfully. So you need that discipline, you need the synthesis, then you create. Now, what is this? It's more a leadership than a managerial function. That's very important to remember. It's the ability to innovate and think out of a box. Now, imagine today you take, Uber for granted. You take Ola for granted, right? Now, imagine 15 years ago, 20 years ago, nobody thought of this as a possibility, right? That's true innovation, right? It's a blue ocean strategy. That why don't I connect everyone who's willing to drive people around into one app which everybody else can use, right? We never knew this 15, 20 years ago. So that is the ability to innovate. Then what happens? You have to develop a compelling narrative. It's not just, if you think about it, if you're starting a company, you have a startup, you need to evangelize your startup, which means that you need to have that narrative in your head. Why is this that I am doing extremely important? What is the relevance of what I am doing? And even if you're not a startup founder, if you're in a job and you want to convince people to follow you and do things, which is leadership, once again, the narrative becomes important. It has to be compelling. It's got to hold my attention, right? Then you need to get people to do things. And how do you do that? By persuasion and by example. Right? When COVID happened, 4 days after, I said, I'm going to clinic. The lockdown started. I said, nobody's stopping me from sitting in clinic. I'm going to go sit in my clinic. Everyone said, why are you going? I said, if I don't go, how can I expect my staff to come? I need to be there in the front. Only then can I expect them to come. Right? So you need to lead by example. I am willing to take the risk because I want to look after my patients. Only then I can tell them that you guys need to take the risk. Please come. Right? We need to look after our patients. Then it becomes our patients. This is important. And then, of course, finally, if you think about it, Big Bang thinking out of the box. So the people who founded, Uber, Ola, whatever. The number of things today which are mind-boggling. Facebook, right? Or Insta. The people who founded these things engaged in out-of-the-box Big Bang thinking. And that's very important. Once you reach a certain point, if you aspire to be a true leader, then Howard Gardner says you need two other minds. He's already told you about the disciplined mind, the synthesizing mind, and the creating mind. Now he says you need to be respectful. Now what is a respectful mind? It is the ability to empathize with others, to make common cause with them, understand where they are coming from. And if you can't do that, you won't be a great leader, is the point that he's trying to make. Empathy. I can feel what you are feeling. That's empathy. Okay? I understand instinctively what you're feeling. I'm able to put myself in your shoes. Is a very important leadership quality. In fact, it's predicted that the larger majority of CEOs in the next 20 years will be women. Why? The big E, empathy. Right? They're more capable of empathy than male CEOs is the prediction. Okay? I'm not saying this is true. I'm telling you it's a prediction. And then, of course, there is something called the ethical mind. Our chairman was just talking about how MMA is doing so many things for the community, is conscious about the community. As individuals, we need to understand our roles as a worker, as a citizen, someone who belongs to a region, a nation, and a planet. What are my duties and obligations? And we need to have this concept that the world needs to be a good place and I need to work towards it. Which means that starts in my workspace. My workspace needs to be good. Now this is the ethical mind. Okay? And if you don't have an ethical mind, if you don't have integrity, most enterprises without that will fail. You'll do well in the short term, but you won't succeed in the long term if you don't have integrity, because you can fool, all people some of the time, some people all of the time, but you can't fool all people all of the time, right? So ethics and integrity therefore become important. But ask yourself the question, here's the richest man in the world, okay? Are all leaders respectful and ethical? It's being prescribed to you, right? When he bought Twitter, 80% of people lost their jobs. And I think all you got from Twitter was an email saying, so sorry you don't work here. Right? So was that being respectful and ethical? That's a question that we are left with to think about. So sometimes leadership is not all about being respectful and ethical. I'm just going to take you down a slightly different tangent now. Let me give you the other example, Steve Jobs. Okay? And if you read about Steve Jobs, here are a few things people say about him. He has a reality distortion field. In his presence, reality is malleable. He can convince anyone of practically anything. It wears off when he's not around, but it makes it hard to have realistic schedules. Another comment about him. It came from willfully defying reality, not only to others, but to himself. He can deceive himself. Here's another comment about him. He reminded me of Rasputin. He laser beamed in on you and didn't blink. It did not matter if he was serving a strange purple juice. You drank it. Okay? So when you read about Steve Jobs, he not only could tell you different things at different times that were totally contradictory, he could convince you about those totally contradictory things. He was also himself convinced about those totally contradictory things. Right? Now, why is this important? Why am I saying this? I'm saying this to say a lot of leaders do this. That's because a lot of effective leaders are what? Psychopathic. Right? A psychopath is someone who's got low empathy. A psychopath is someone who cares more about himself than anybody else in the room. But very often, people who make it to the top of the boardroom are psychopaths. And this is something that I'm going to give you more examples, but this is something that you need to think about, right? That empathy may not always be a good thing. Being respectful and ethical may not always be a good thing. And I need to obviously bring you back and convince you it's important to be respectful and ethical, but I'm going to make some points. Now, what differentiates those with positive psychopathic attributes? One of the most famous serial killers is Ted Bundy. You can Google it. Okay? Ted Bundy murdered 36 people. And do you know how he picked up his victims? He picked them out by the way they walked. Okay? The gait told him that this person's vulnerable, good to kill. Now, that is psychopathy with criminal intent and negative consequences. Okay? But what's common between him and a Steve Jobs and an Elon Musk? These people are ice cool under pressure. Okay? They don't feel emotions the way most people do. Okay? And they balance an aptitude for predatory violence with enhanced empathy, the ability to get under the skin of their victims.